Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for card number 2 in my series 1 Stamp 4 Ways. I'm using this stamp set by Simon Says Stamp called Cloudy Skies. I'm using it every week for 4 weeks. Today's card is a pull tab interactive card, so the glittery cloud pulls up to show the message underneath. I'll be using both the stamp set and the die set for this card. So let me show you how it works. So I have this little message that says pull, and the silver cloud pulls up to slowly show the message, and then there's a stopper to make sure it doesn't pull completely out of the card. And then when you put it back in, it tucks in behind the other clouds. I'm going to start by creating a stencil out of my die. This is the Sunburst die by Stampin' Up! I'm going to take a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock and I'm going to mark it at 2 1/4 inches from the top. This is a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch size. And then I'm going to grab my masking tape. Mine is on a roll. I bought it years and years ago. It now comes in sheets, so you just have to grab your sheet and just cut off enough to die cut the top portion of this die. So I'm going to actually use the negative. So I'm going to peel this off my acrylic plate and I'll place it down on my cardstock. Alright, so I stopped my camera because I had to redo this. The first time I did it, I went too far down with my yellow. So I'm going to try this again, which is why you see yellow on my mask here. But I'm going to make sure it's securely in place. You can reuse these things over and over, this masking tape. And I'm going to clearly mark my 2 1/4 inch mark to make sure that I don't go down any further than that because the rest of the card is supposed to be white. I'm using Memento Luxe ink in Dandelion and a sponge dauber, and I'm just carefully placing the ink on my cardstock, and I'm really being careful to just do up and down motions in the direction of the rays. Now if you have trouble with ink blending, I find that pigment inks blend beautifully because they just lay on the top of the paper, so it doesn't soak in and cause blocks and things like that. So these types of inks are really easy to blend on a piece of cardstock. So I make sure my whole thing is covered with the dandelion, and I'm going to peel it away, and then I get this nice pretty bright sunshine. Turns out I didn't need that extra little piece I added afterward. Now I'm going to work on stamping my clouds. I'm going to be using these 2 large clouds that have designs on them and the small solid cloud. I have Wisteria Wonder, So Saffron, and Soft Sky inks by Stampin' Up! And I'm just going to stamp all 3 of these in all 3 colors because I'm not really sure which clouds I'm going to use, and that way I have options. So I'm going to stamp them all on some Stampin' Up! White cardstock. I always use Stampin' Up! Cardstock with the Stampin' Up! Inks because it just gives you the best results. So I die cut all these out, and I found when I first started cutting them that I had some weirdness in my paper. I'm going to show you. This is one of the ones that I did first. I don't know if you could see it, but some parts of the cardstock are raised up and some are not in just kind of a random place on my die cut. So what I ended up figuring out is that when you separate these dies and you cut the wire, if there is a little nub left over, it will create those up and down hills and valleys in your die cut. It's really kind of strange, but what you need is these pliers here and just cut it as close as you possibly can to the die edge. And once I did that, then my clouds looked perfect. I wanted a special cloud to be the pull, so I have this glitter cardstock. Mine has adhesive on the back, so I just peeled it off and put it on a piece of cardstock, but if yours doesn't have adhesive, then you just cut the cardstock directly. This is Coordinations glitter cardstock. So I'm going to cut the large cloud out of that, so I have something special for the pull tab. Now I can work on my pull tab. So the size of this tab is 3 3/4 by 1 1/2 inch. And then I cut 5 strips of cardstock, a 1/2 inch by 2 1/4 inch. And this is all Neenah Solar White. I'm going to take each of these strips and color them with Copic markers. So I'm just going to take my chisel tip, which I really don't use very often, and I'm going to color the whole thing, the whole strip with the marker. And the reason why I chose Copic markers is because it gives a really nice solid color where you don't have streaks at all. So the first one is RV13, and I'm going to work through the rainbow here. I'm going to do our YR65 for my orange, and then for yellow I'm using Y11. This is just a really pale yellow. And then I skipped the green and made a blue-green instead. So this is BG10. And then finally, purple is BV01. These are all very pastel-looking colors. I wanted them to match up with the inks I used for the clouds. I'm going to adhere these diagonally. I'm measuring 5/8 of an inch down. I felt that that worked for me the best. And I'm going to take some tape runner and go all the way down the middle with this. And then I'm going to take some Tombow Mono Multi-Glue because I don't want any of these strips kind of coming up on the edge because then it'll cause issues with my pull. So I'm just going to make sure I have glue at the very, very edge here to make sure they're nice and secure and they're not going to kind of curl up or anything. And then I'm going to take each one of my strips and place them diagonally right up against each other, all in a row, starting at that 5/8 of an inch mark on the left-hand side. I'm just sort of eyeballing the angle to place this. So I'm going to put them all down. And then when I got to the end, I still had some glue left over and some space. So what I ended up deciding is to take a piece of white cardstock and just fill in the gap at the very bottom. So here's my white piece, and I'm just going to put it diagonally, and that way all of these pieces of cardstock are all at the same level. And then I just took my scissor. I use my Stampin' Up! Craft scissors for things like this. They're just really large, nice and sharp scissors, and I'm cutting around all 3 of these sides to make sure that my tab is nice and smooth on all edges. The sentiment I use is from the Mama Elephant Woodland gift set. That is the reason why my strips are 1/2 inch wide each, is because I made them to fit the sentiment. So just adjust your strips depending on what sentiment you use. Anyway, so I covered all the different areas that I needed to cover on each one of these and stamped them in VersaFine Black Onyx ink, and I centered them all on each one of these strips. For the last one, I thought I would add some hearts, so I found this strip of hearts in the Tiny Ray of Sunshine set by Simon Says Stamp. So I just inked up 3 of them and stamped them on my purple strip. So here is the finished sentiment. I'm going to take a piece of Scotch foam tape and cut it in half and put that strip at the very top of my tab, and that is what's going to adhere my silver cloud to the top. I'm just going to center it right there at the top. Now it's time to create my slot. So I'm marking the center, which is 2 1/8, and then I'm going to center my ruler on the 2-inch mark. I'm going to measure 1 inch minus a 1/16, 1 inch minus a 1/16, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I want a slot that's 1 7/8 of an inch wide, and I thought that would be the easiest way to measure that. So I'm just going to take a ruler and a mat and my X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to cut this slot, and that way I have a hole to put my tab into. Because I don't want the recipient to pull the tab all the way out, I need to create a stopper. So I created these strips that are 1/4 of an inch wide and I think about 2 1/4 of an inch long, and I'm going to put some adhesive liberally on the back, and I'm going to place it at the very bottom edge. So just lined up at that bottom edge in the center. And then I'm going to do the same thing, flip it over, and do the same thing with this other piece. And that way I get a nice secure stopper on both sides to make sure that it doesn't pull out. And this is wider than my 1 7/8 slot. And actually I meant to put this on after I put the tab into the slot, but it turns out that you can push it in through the cloud side, so I got lucky. But if I were you, I would put the tab in and then put my stopper on. So you can see when I pull it up, it's not going to come out because it's stopped by that cardstock I glued to the bottom. Now that I've prevented the tab from coming out the top, I want to make sure it doesn't go through the bottom or too far down. So I'm going to add some Scotch foam tape to the bottom edge of the card. Again, I'm going to cut it in half so that I don't have to use too much space for this. And then I'll put it right at the bottom. And for now, I'm just going to secure the bottom and we'll do the rest later. So I'm going to position my tab at the very, very bottom before I put the rest of my clouds on, so I know exactly where that cloud is going to start when the recipient gets the card. So I'm going to arrange all my clouds the way I want them. And to make this easy, I took some masking tape. Again, this one is on a roll, and I just cut a strip off and I put it on top of the clouds that I had positioned. I haven't adhered them yet, I just positioned them. And this, because all of my clouds are showing, it'll stick to every single one, and I can just pull them right off and they'll all be exactly where I want them. Now I ended up deciding putting it back on because I need to make sure that I don't put adhesive anywhere near that tab. So I took one of the clouds I didn't use and put it on top of the silver one just to get it, just to have a guide. And so I'm going to pencil around this cloud, and this is the area where I do not want to put any adhesive because I want that tab to be able to pull up. So at least now I know where the cloud is, but then I need to know where the tab is as well. So I'm just going to kind of measure where the tab is in relation to the cloud, like how far in it is. And I'm going to pencil that in, and then it's showing about 1/4 of an inch or so. You could see the U there. And so I'm going to measure that, about eyeball it, and put a pencil mark there, and that's where adhesive should not go as well. So I'm just going to make sure that I put all of my dimensionals around that penciled area. I noticed there was one spot where the clouds were overlapped where I couldn't put adhesive. So I took a 2A glue pen and I just put some adhesive between the clouds to make sure that they stuck together. And that way I didn't have to worry about getting any adhesive on that silver cloud. I just put it in between the two that were loose. So now I'm going to peel off all the backing and make sure that my tab is all the way at the bottom. So that's exactly where my silver cloud is going to start. And then I'll flip it over and carefully position my clouds again using that guide. Now it's easy to put it back on because I drew those pencil lines around the cloud. And once I get it positioned correctly, I'm just going to press down. You maybe not too hard, because if you need to pull it up again, you'll get a chance to redo it if something is not right. But then slowly pull the masking tape off. And mine covered it pretty well. You don't want any of the tabs showing, and mine worked out pretty well. So I just went ahead and pressed it firmly in place to make sure it was permanent. And then I'm just going to test it to make sure there was no adhesive behind that cloud, and there wasn't. I'm going to flip the card over and just trim off the clouds that are hanging over the edge. I need some instruction for the recipient. I'm going to make this really simple. I have a 3/4 inch punch. So I'm going to punch this circle. And I'm going to take my Copic liner. This is a 0.05, I think. It's really, really fine. And I'm just going to write the word pull on the edge of the circle. And I'm going to take a scissor and kind of sharpen out the edges, make them straight. And then I'm going to take my tweezers, put it on my tweezers, add some 2A glue pen to the top. And then I'm going to put it right underneath that silver cloud. And when I press down, it should adhere just to the cloud. Now you want to be careful. I didn't use Tombow Mono multi-glue because it dries tacky, and I didn't want any tackiness interfering with my pull tab. The sentiment comes with this Cloudy Sky set, so I'm going to use my Misty since I've spent so much time on this card. I don't want anything getting messed up. This is VersaFine Black Onyx ink, and I'm going to stamp it right underneath the clouds. If you remember, I put some Scotch foam tape just on the bottom, and the reason for that is because I needed a flat, even surface to stamp my sentiment. So now I'm going to add kind of the gateway for my tab. So I want to have something that's going to keep it on both sides from moving from left to right. So I'm just adding some Scotch foam tape right on the outside of where that stopper tab is. And that way it'll make sure that it doesn't go side to side. It keeps right in place. It's just creating kind of a roadway for your tab. And then I'm going to finish off this panel with a bunch of foam tape so it's all the same level. And I'm taking a piece of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch Neenah Solar White folded cardstock. Now I'm just making sure that it's going up and down smoothly in between my Scotch foam tape. And that is the card. So here we go. I'm just going to pull it up. I'm going to hold it with my left hand, pull with my right. You are so loved, and you get the sentiment. And then you just push it right back in, and it tucks in behind the clouds. And that is the card for today. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.